Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West. Got a great guest today. We're going to be talking a lot about the human element of security, and this gentleman is a level 99 expert. We have Brad Beeler, and let me give you some insight. He's a former Secret Service agent, special agent, and he is an author. We're going to be definitely talking about his book a lot, a speaker. But some of these accolades here is a investigative. I'm trying to make sure I get this there. He's conducted the most criminal polygraph examinations of any U.S. Secret Service agent ever. So, did I get that fact right?
You did.
All right. Well, without further ado, Brad, welcome to the Top Side Pro podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Jim. I really appreciate it.
So, let's dive right into the book. You just published a book recently, and it's called Tell Me Everything. And what a great title, first to start off with, given the subject matter. But tell me a little bit about the why. Like Simon Sinek's all about the why, right? What is the why for this book?
The why, Jim, was saw that the locals weren't getting a ton of training. The state weren't getting a lot of training. Feds, we were falling behind in talking to human beings. So I really viewed this as an interview interrogation book at one point. But the more and more I wrote it, I saw that there were so many echoes of how this applies in general life, with parents talking to their kids in boardrooms, during hiring type situations. So I really had a great editor who had me open up the aperture on it. And I think it landed in a good place where we kind of made it into a communication book.
The first immediate thing when I heard about the book that I correlated immediately to was a great speaker himself and also former I think he was a FBI negotiator was Chris Voss, and
Yeah.
that was the immediate parallel I met. But your book actually approaches it in a different angle, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Obviously, Chris, man, if I could sell 3 million books, that would be amazing, right? I would
Oh,
glad to
hey,
have his,
you're only what about 4 or 5 months in,
yeah, yeah. It
so
takes
hey,
it
there's
takes
still
some
some
time.
miles to go here. So hey,
There you go.
so
But yeah, no, it definitely takes a little bit of a different tack from the standpoint of, he looks at it from the hostage negotiation standpoint and then applies those lessons to, just everyday life. And I'm trying to look at it a little bit broader from the standpoint of how do we set up for communication? How do we make great first impressions? How do we detect deception? And then how do we talk to people when they have been deceptive to us, without losing those relationships?
So in your examinations of people, what are what are some of the common things or red flags? And again, I don't want to give the secret sauce away because this might actually help malicious actors prepare. But what it would be just a high level common, red flag or indicator you'd be like, okay, someone's being deceptive or at least not being fully forthcoming.
Sure. I look at it more of like a check engine light instead of a red flag. I used to overuse that term a lot. And all human behavior, there's very few red flags. So it's more just because it's so complex. It's so hard to see these things. I wish we had an operator guide, but I view it as a check engine light. So what I would say is if you ask someone a yes or no question, you should get a yes or no answer, and it should be in a timely fashion. So if you want to just kind of dissect that a little bit, if I ask you, Jim, did you shoot that man? Did you steal that money? Whatever the case may be, is no.
Hmm.
And it should be said no with an exclamation point, not no. And there shouldn't be any delay, right? So
Okay.
if I ask my daughter, I use her as an example a lot, but she's 15. So it's that age where, sometimes they're not 100% honest with us. And I'll ask her, did you clean your room, Sydney? Yes. Well, that's a very, if I had my eyes closed, it would be a question mark next to that yes and not
Well,
an exclamation point. So that's a check engine light. Re ask the question. Or if I ask a question like, did you get all, keyword there, all your homework done? And she says, I got all my math homework done. Well, that was overly specific. What homework did she not get done? People don't like to lie. We don't like that Pinocchio effect. We don't like the way our body feels when we get lying. We don't like the consequences when we get caught when we lie.
yeah.
So we do certain things to avoid that. One, we delay. So if I ask you a yes or no question and I am used to getting a third of a second from stimulus to response, and all of a sudden now I get 3/4 of a second. So it's no, no, no. That's a problem. If
Okay.
I get usually, typically, normally these exclusive qualifiers, that's an issue. If I get like you're shaking your head yes right now, but then you
Uh-huh.
get no with that, or if I get yes with the shaking of the head no,
Your body
that's
betrays your.
your body is betraying you because you're so worried about what you're going to say. But our body's on a different operating system, to kind of use
Mhm.
the terminology of your listeners. And what we're operating on is it's kind of like the truth is easy. All right. I've got no windows up in my computer panel. It's just I've got the highest Wi-Fi. Boom. It's yeah. Yes or no question. I answer yes or no. Whereas when you get cognitive load, meaning you got those 18 windows opened up on the top of your screen, and your RAM is a little bit low, and all of a sudden your computer gets a little glitched up. That's what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for those things to leak out from a body language standpoint, that's not congruent with the spoken word, the exclusive qualifiers, the delay, or the vocal inflection. Those are things that I can go from being roughly 50% effective at determining truth and fiction to maybe now I can get up to 60, 70%. We're still not great, but it's more so check engine light. Let's look under the hood a little bit.
Okay, so let's talk about polygraphs because there's probably a lot of more myth than fact about polygraphs. We see it in TV and law shows, police procedural type of shows all the time, where people are always quick to say, "Well, put me to a lie detector test." In fact, it happens more often than not in just daily conversation when
Yeah.
people are confronting people. They're like, "Well, I'll take a lie detector test." People are so quick to say they want to take a lie detector test, but I don't think people truly understand that could be very stressful and anxious period to be hooked up to the machine that's measuring all your biologicals, I guess, etc.
Yeah.
But we've seen it in the film. I think the most popular film, I think it was one of the Ocean's 11 movies where one of their team members was going to have to go through a poly before he got a job at the casino. So he had, I think, put a tack or a nail in his shoe and he kept like stepping on it during, I guess, difficult questions or trying to mess with the baseline, I guess. But
Mhm.
is let's talk a little bit about the myths and then maybe some facts to counter those myths.
Yeah, sure. So you're going to have, a lot of good, bad, and indifferent when it comes to polygraph. You Google polygraph, and you're going to get 10 million hits. The vast majority of them are going to be negative. And I will say this about polygraph: we are so bad as humans at determining truth and fiction. Once again, we're about a coin flip in the biggest studies. Is that polygraph is the best mousetrap we got? It's been around since the 1920s. Was major renovations were done in the 1940s, and we roughly have the same instrument that we did back then. If we had a better mousetrap, we would use it.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. It shouldn't be used in court. But I take something that's was a coin flip, and now I can get up into the 80s, maybe close to 90% when used in the right time, the right place, with the right headspace of the person. And I say that, and you'll get comments on your feed. Oh, I beat one, or this is ridiculous. I know of this person that was a false positive. You're going to get that when you bring this topic up because it's just one of those topics. But when we have guardrails on it, especially in the federal system, when we have great quality control in which we only utilize it in specific circumstances, it can be a very effective, truly, and I mean this word, tool. And that's just the way you have to use it. It's one tool in the toolbox that decides where should I potentially go from this investigation. I hear it a lot when I would travel armed with the Secret Service. I'd go and I'd fly, and you got to check in with the pilot. And a pilot would be, oh, Secret Service, where are you going? I'm going to Toledo. What are you going to do? Is the president going there? Nah, I'm going to run some polygraphs. Polygraph, man, I heard those things don't work, and I heard that you could beat them. And I'm like, well, let me give you a little analogy. I said, magnetometers aren't perfect, but there's 400 people on this plane that you're trusting, right? He goes, oh, yeah, it's a good point. So you mean like it's not perfect, but people might not have tried to bring something on because they thought they might have got caught. I said, interesting.
Mhm.
And then I said, look, we're flying a 747. You got, how big's your manual? Oh, it's about 1,500 pages. I said, if I read that and I took weeks and you tested me and I got 100% on the test, could I jump in a simulator and fly and land this plane? He goes, absolutely not. You need to be behind the stick. You got to check the rudder and what's this and these circumstances. I said, okay, so if I don't have biofeedback and I don't see, what's happening on the radar or whatever, I would crash this plane, right? He goes, yeah. He goes, it's the same thing if somebody tries to mess with the test. He goes, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't see what your inputs and what you're doing is affecting what I'm seeing, it's a big problem. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's easy for us to see, but a lot more people have been caught attempting to use countermeasures than people that shouldn't have done anything, that were afraid of going to be a false positive. If they would have came in, been 100% honest, the vast majority of people aren't going to have issues on that polygraph. And it's just unfortunate they go on TikTok, they go on the internet, hey, do this, do that, put the tack in the shoe type thing to try to help themselves out. Get a good night's sleep,
Yeah.
get something to eat in the morning, and be honest. And vast majority of people, and like I said, a lot of people will hear what I just said and they'll go in the comments and they'll be like, polygraphs suck. This guy's an acolyte. Of course, he's going to say those things. That's fine.
But
Okay.
you bring
But
up a good
we
point. When people are caught doing those quote unquote countermeasures to try to beat the poly, that in and of itself is a deceptive tactic, which, questions their integrity, right? And so that right there already
absolutely,
calls into
yeah.
question
I mean, think about this. If you've got to do a positive, if you have a urinalysis up and coming, and let's say you water it down, okay? If you provide watered down urine, what do you think people are going to think? Why are you trying to affect the system? You may not agree with the system, but you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to affect it. And as a result, that's going to be viewed as a positive urinalysis, or at least you're going to have some issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be that check engine light where now they're going to really
Chicken
start
shit.
looking. So yeah, it's not perfect. It should not determine whether somebody goes to jail for the rest of their life just based upon a polygraph result. But in the right time, in the right place, with the right headspace, it's a very effective tool for us.
So let's talk about Tell Me Everything. Let's get back to the book for a second. For someone out there, what is this book? Who is this book for? Let's start there. Who is this? What is Tell Me Everything? Who is the ideal reader for this book?
Man, I would have told you law enforcement when I first started writing it about 3 years ago. But as I started getting into the chapters, I really got into wow, human communication. Everybody needs to prep for communication. So I talk about well, what do we do on the front end? Everybody needs to make an amazing first impression by having a dry, warm handshake at a 2% or at a 2 o'clock angle where they can see the white of your hands at the navel level. That's a hold and not a
Okay.
shake.
Okay.
Yeah, you're showing me the white of your palms. You're showing me you don't have a weapon. And what that's really hacking into, Jim, is the fact that I like the word hacking, right? For
Hmm.
your people, is it's really hacking into the concept of what is a first impression. A first impression is 200,000 years ago, our ancestors seeing something in the bushes, hearing something in the bushes, and making an assumption on is that going to hurt me or is it not going to hurt me? And I'm trying to collect as much information as possible. So when people first see me, I want them to very quickly collect information from me that I am not a threat. I don't want a neutral facial expression. I want a slightly positive facial expression. I want to turn my head just slightly to the side with a little bit
Lower
of
the
an eyebrow
guard.
flash. Absolutely. I'm trying to put deposits in a metaphorical trust bank. Okay. What I'm doing is these little tiny deposits of a great handshake, an eyebrow lift, a slight head tilt, ventral fronting. I'm showing the vulnerable parts of my body. These are friend signs that are deposits in the trust bank. What I don't want is I don't want withdrawals in that trust bank. I don't want a wet handshake, a cold handshake. I don't want to be looking at my phone. I don't want to be bladed in my body. I don't want that neutral facial expression. Those are all withdrawals from the trust bank. And as a result, people tend to put horns on those people, and due to confirmation bias, what's going to happen is it's hard to me to get out of debt, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whereas what I want to do is I want to have that green, that positive balance where people put that halo on me. And as a result, I can, and I hate to use the word take advantage, but the criminals out there do that every single day with
Mm.
AI, with the fact that people used to put everything in a diary and now they put it on their Instagram or their socials. What happens is you look at dating apps right now and nefarious individuals, they can take that profile photo, they can go to a face reverse, picture app. They can find out where you've used that before and they can go to all your socials, they can mine all that information and they can weaponize it and they can become that mythical Prince Charming. And with that and AI, they can no longer have to carpet bomb or make assumptions. They can make very, very targeted pitches, fishes, all those types of things. So that, and obviously, I'm sure some of your guests have talked about the ability to change voices, the ability to change faces. They know when you're out of town, when you're not out of town. So now grandma gets that phone call and that face now looks like your granddaughter, needing money, needing that green dot card, whatever the case may be. And then that's where the scam happens, is the ability to establish trust. The truth doesn't come before trust. So the speed at which we can get trust now because of what we put out online is very
Mm.
problematic.
Wow. And you're absolutely right. With a little bit of open source intelligence, you can get a really good profile on people these days. And it's funny how, before the advent of social media and the social media platforms, it took a lot of work for investigators to build these profiles on people. But now with social media, people are so forthcoming with publishing everything. Like you mentioned, vacations, and people
Mhm.
wonder why now there's an increase in burglaries now when people are going on vacation because they're posting as they're away in Hawaii and their home back in the States is getting, in the continental US is getting robbed while they're on vacation. And it's
Yeah,
just amazing.
100%. And it can also be, we've got some people out there that are just awkward in conversation, right? They may ask, hey, how's the weather? They may be like, what are you doing this weekend? They have those, you meet them at a party, you meet them down the hall, and they just don't have the ability to connect. I don't want to be creepy about it when I'm going to talk to somebody, but if somebody's putting information out there, I might find some organic talking points that I know I can bring up. And the thing about it is when people are talking about themselves, you're using the voice that's the most soothing to themselves, their own.
Hmm.
Since they were in the womb, that own voice actually brought their heart rate down. So for me, good conversation is like a good podcast. Look, you talked to me in the green room. We talked a couple things out. So you made a great first impression. You lowered my anxiety. You did
Hmm.
prep work. You read a little bit of the book, those types of things. Then you let me talk 80% of the time. You advocate for me. You bring me up from a rabbit hole I go down. You tease out things that you think might be of interest to your audience. And that's a great conversation. It's a great podcast. So for me, those are some things that I think your audience can glean from is be observant, not just of people in their virtual space, but when you're walking down the hall and you look into somebody's office, they're putting adornments of things they want to talk about. So let them talk about it, because when they do, that oxytocin, that serotonin, those neurochemicals that are positive are going to bring the cortisol levels, the stress hormones down in them, and also they're going to associate that positive chemicals with you.
Mm.
And you're not doing anything. I can't tell you how many criminals have said to me, "Oh my God, you should be a therapist. Oh my God, you're such a great listener." I'm not doing anything. I'm doing nothing other than saying, "Tell me about that. What is it about that?" Especially Jim with leisure activities. Let's run this out real quick. What do you like to do in your free time, Jim?
Oh, I love to play video games, Call of Duty, shooters.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Are you more of like old school Call of Duty guy or more the futuristic
I
Call of
like the
Duty
more
guy?
modern. Yeah.
Okay, what is it? So, like, because for me, like World of War was where it was at, like one of the first ones out. Loved that game. What is it about Call of Duty you enjoy so much?
I like the tactics and the strategy. Every now and then I'll get in a position where I can wipe out a whole team of 4 or 5 players all at once, and that's really the big thrill, right?
Okay, so I could do that for another 10 minutes, talking about what's your loadout, what's
Hmm.
your favorite type of characters. Are you a
Hmm.
sniper? Are you more of a CQB guy?
Hmm.
Because that's something that's interested me. But the worst thing I do is when you would bring that up, if I said me too, because
Hmm.
I put a wet blanket on that conversation. And versus if I let you keep talking about this, and we could be talking about running, whatever you had mentioned,
Yeah.
by you going down that rabbit hole, I see your eyes light up. And you're not thinking about talking about bad things now. You're thinking, he's just like me. And when you
Hmm.
start thinking he's just like me, now we're friends. And if
Hmm.
we're in a foreign land, who do you gravitate to? You're in the Middle East right now, right?
Yep.
So, what's your favorite sports team?
Oh, favorite sports team, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay. If you're in Pittsburgh on a Sunday in October, everybody's going to have Pittsburgh Steelers stuff on, right?
Yep.
Who cares? You might give them a head nod. You are in Albuquerque on a Sunday and you're both wearing Steelers stuff. You might give them a head nod and be like, "Hey, man,
Yep.
so and so, what do you think about the game tonight?" You're in the Middle East and you see somebody with a Pittsburgh Steeler jersey on, you're
Oh yeah,
best
we're definitely
friends.
having a conversation and maybe even taking a selfie together.
100%, right? Like, hey, I'm in Abu Dhabi. Look at my boy here. You
Yep.
might talk for hours. So I'm using that metaphor as I need to find out what their Pittsburgh Steelers jersey is in that
Hmm.
conversation. And I have to become that as best as possible, not from a manipulation standpoint, but from a comfort standpoint.
Hmm.
This could be to get a victim or witness to just feel comfortable enough to provide that disclosure to me. Or it could be in this sense. I had one subject, one of the worst criminals I ever talked to, Jim, accused of horrific acts against a child. But in talking to him on his social media, he had tons of images of a pit bull, his pet. So I organically knew I was going to bring that up. I brought it up. He told me about it. He thought that was the most important thing in his life. So for 30 minutes, he talked about his pit bull. He was beaming. Now, that was just after he told me that something very, very bad happened to him as a kid. The
Hmm.
analogy I did was I said, "Hey Bob, you got this pit bull." I said, "What's the stereotype of pit bull about pit bulls?" He goes, "Well, people think they're mean, but they're not because you got to raise them right." And I said, "You got to raise them right, correct? If you raise them right, the whole nature versus nurture thing, if you take care of them, they are amazing pets, aren't they, Bob?" He goes, "Absolutely." I said, "But if you teach them wrong, they may bite you, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Something wrong happened to you and changed your life trajectory, didn't it? You told me that earlier. Unfortunately, you didn't have that nurture. And unfortunately, it caused you to bite here. Is that what we're talking about?" And that's when he made the confession. People
Wow.
they want that off ramp.
Yeah.
They want that ability to not look like the boogeyman. And the boogeyman doesn't even think he's the boogeyman. So everyone's the hero of their own adventure, and you
Yep.
need to provide everyone an out.
And out. That's really interesting because, you're not using any like what we see in the police and lawyer shows. They're just attacking and putting all this coercion and pressure on the person to finally break and just confess, right? We see that all the time represented in shows and movies and film. But you're actually talking a different approach where you're not using any kind of coercion. You're just kind of, like you said, giving them the off ramp for them to choose to take it. So they're almost
Yeah.
offering to give the
Yeah.
information than to
It's
being forced and compelled to.
so it's like this. It's I want to be someone's buddy. In that if I was interrogating Saddam Hussein, or let me put this way, if I was to interrogate Osama bin Laden,
Hmm.
I would have to talk to him as if he's George Washington. They both represented 3% of their people. 3% were patriots, 3% were radical Islam. They both fought against two empires. All right. One, the Russians and the United States, the other, the British and the French at the behest of the others. They both used what at the time were considered to be terroristic acts. Okay. Obviously, with Washington firing from the woods, they were both very, very rich and got very poor as a result of their actions. They were both very, very religious and they were both very, very tall. Now, there's a lot of similarities there, huge amount of differences. But if I'm interrogating Osama bin Laden, taking into account everyone's the hero of their own adventure, I would have to approach him as if he's his country's, as hard as it is to do, he's their George Washington. So it's all the difference between perception and perspective.
Yep.
I may have a perception of someone, but I'm not going to get anywhere unless I understand their perspective. And that's 101 that we teach our students is it's hard to get into someone that hurts kids perspective, but I have to do it. And if you do it and you can understand what makes them tick, you can understand why they did that bad thing. And if I can understand why they did it, then I can speak their language. And that's what people want us to do.
It's an interesting dynamic because about a year ago, I was having a somewhat similar discussion about like Star Wars and the Rebel Alliance and Star Wars were effectively terrorists. They blew up a big facility, killing thousands of independent contractors on the Death Star and other government, workers for the Empire. But the whole conversation was how we glorify rebels and the people fighting
Yeah,
against the totalitarian governments and so forth. And so in the film, we idolize this, but in real life, we quickly label these groups terrorist groups, etc. So it's like you said, that
I love it.
perspective. Yeah.
I love it. And so let me do it. Let me run this out and then I'll turn it over to like a Darth Vader interrogation. So if I want to be someone's buddy, I want to blame outside forces. I want to understand but not agree with. I want to diminish impact. I want to demonstrate tactical empathy by telling stories, and I want to focus on the why and not the what. If I was interrogating Harry S. Truman for firebombing Japanese cities and dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what would I do? I'd be his buddy. Who would
Okay.
I blame? I would blame the Empire of Japan. I would say June, December 6th, 1941, we were isolationists. We were following Monroe Doctrine. We were causing no harm. We were supplying the Allies, but that was it.
Hmm.
And guess what happened? The Empire of Japan decided in a sneak attack to kill
Sure.
3,000 of our soldiers, sailors, and airmen. So that's my blame. Then I would understand. I'd say, I get it, Harry. You felt like you needed to do this because you had to write letters home to people that were dying at Peleliu and Saipan and Iwo Jima, and you saw they were not going to stop fighting for the emperor. Then I would diminish impact and say, yeah, Harry, you did kill 1 million people, but you saved millions more. Estimates were millions of U.S. service members and other Japanese, civilians would have died if we would have kept having to do what we were doing because they weren't going to quit. Then I would demonstrate tactical empathy because people since caveman days, Jim, love stories. And I'd say, it's kind of like it's 2 a.m. and you're a surgeon in a local hospital and a 2-year-old girl comes in. She's been in a horrific car accident and you have to make a tough choice, Harry. Am I going to take the leg or am I going to try to fix the leg? If I try to fix the leg, sepsis may kick in and she may die. If I take the leg, she'll live, but she'll have this disability for the rest of her life. You made that tough decision. You took the leg. And then I focus on the why and not the what. The
Hmm.
what is horrific. But if I focus on the why and the understanding of the why from their perspective, I can say, Harry, you made a tough call. You took the leg. These people did die. I'm not going to take that away from you. But you're the man from Missouri and the buck stops here. And you were the one person that stepped up to the plate to finally end this.
Wow,
That's an
what a way to
interrogation.
step through that. Wow, my
But
mind's
but
blown how you just walked that
now
through.
but now let me flip it to you because I love this that you have that Star Wars understanding. Let's say we were interrogating, okay, let's say the rebels caught Darth Vader. So
Okay.
post Anakin, how would you be his buddy? Let's start off. Who would we blame for him trying to conquer the world?
We would the Rebel Alliance. They're just blowing stuff up, causing destruction and mayhem. Yeah.
Okay. Could we then maybe say, "Hey, Anakin," if we use him by that name, I understand why you did this because who was controlling him?
Oh, the Emperor.
Okay, the Emperor. What happened to his two kids when they were born?
Oh, they were taken from him.
What happened to his mother?
Oh yeah, the mother died. Yeah, his Padme died. Yeah.
What did his mentor do to him or keep from him?
Oh yeah, his mentor. Yeah, cut him down in a fight. Yeah,
Okay,
betrayed
so
him
you
from
see
his
where we're
perspective.
so so you see where we're going with this. We don't have to use mind control techniques if we were interrogating Anakin,
Hmm.
aka Darth Vader. We'd be his buddy. We'd blame
Hmm.
other people. We'd understand. We'd diminish impact in order to give him that off ramp so he could feel wanting to talk to us.
Wow, what a great wow! Hearing this from you and how you just walked through that, that was just, and it seems easier said than done, but obviously to get to a point to your level, it obviously took a lot of lessons learned, a lot of experience. I mean, again, you got the most criminal polygraph examinations there under your belt. So I mean, wow, what a wealth of knowledge and experience. So let's actually go to one of my first agenda questions, my favorite one.
Yeah.
If we go back in time to day one when you said, "Hey, I want to work for the government. I want to work on things that are focused on human behavior and kind of deciphering that, decoding that." Was there a story behind that day one for you? And what's that story?
Well, so I'll give you two stories. So the first story is I learned communication from my best friend to this day. We met about when I was 15, but he's deaf. And I learned communication in its utter form is not about the words you use, it's about how you say the words and how you look when you say the words. So
Okay.
there's lyrics that are on a piece of paper. There's the score, the sound, and then there is the music video, and you got to use all of them effectively. And that's what I learned with Doug, my friend. Was it was about the words I said, but it was how I enunciated the words. It was the pacing of the words. It was my vocal, the way I would speak. It's the way my body language put all that together. And I really carried that because if I can be present, if I can watch him, and if he can understand me, then anybody can understand me. So that was something before the job that got me into it. But I'll say I had one case when I was first on the job during the election of 2000 that blew me away and said, "Man, I want to talk to people." And it was a guy named Bill. And Bill was this grizzled old, he almost like looked like Columbo if you have a visual of an
Yeah.
old grizzled Columbo. And I don't mean that as a detriment. It's just what a seasoned, impressive man. But I was on a protective intelligence case down in the Midwest, and I was a snot nosed kid. I might have had a couple months on the job, and they entrusted me with a very this type of low level advance where you would go to the local mental hospitals and you would on game day handle some of the protesters and stuff like that. But unfortunately, you'd have to handle threats if they came in. And lo and behold, Murphy's Law, 12 hours before the visit, there's a payphone that somebody goes to and makes a phone call to the Republican local headquarters and says, "I'm a sniper. I'm going to hurt W," so on and so forth. And it's like, we caught wind of this. And it's like, oh, no, no cameras see this.
Okay.
And it's a truly an old payphone. And so what we did is Bill helped me out, held my hand through the process. He goes out, he kicks over this trash can that's next to this payphone, and he starts going through it with his knife and going through dirty diapers. And I'm like, what is he doing? And towards the end, he gets a little paper cup, and it's a coffee cup, and he gets a little yellow piece of paper that had the phone number of the Republican headquarters written on it and handwriting. So
Wow.
now we've got handwriting exemplars. DNA was in its infancy, but we know we got fingerprints. But now we're only about 8 hours out of the visit. So he scoops this stuff up, and we look around. The closest store is about 2 blocks away. It's a local supermarket. And Bill's, yeah, let's go there and let's talk to the manager, see if they've got any disgruntled employees, something like that. And so we go there, and as he's talking to the manager, he has his heart rate's so low and his observation skills are so like he'd been there before. The moment wasn't too big for him that he's able to look around and he sees a little yellow piece of paper on the wall next to the phone that has the same tear on it. And so he knows, well, the person was here. He looks in the phone book right below the phone because we used to have phone books. And this phone book had the RNC number underlined. And he asked the manager, he goes, "Hey, we don't know who this person is. We didn't have the ability to get a recording at the time, or else we'd have played it for the manager. But we said roughly male between 50 and 80 years old." He goes, "Oh, yeah, we had three of them on in the meat section, whatever. Can we look at their employment apps because they were handwritten?" And so we compared the handwritten exemplars, and there was a layover on the 2 and a strike through on the 7s. So now we had an address. So we ran over to the house. And at this point, I'm just like, this is like a scenario they teach in training where you're like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. Right. Well, we knock on the door. The old man's wife comes to the door, and wonderful Midwestern lady in her pajamas. She goes, "How you doing?" And Bill's like, "Oh, we'd like to speak with your husband. Went with Secret Service." So we go in, and she's like, "Can I get you something to drink?" And he's like, "You might want to put a pot of coffee on. We may be here a little bit." Okay. And as he's walking to meet the guy, I think the guy's like tying fish flies on the kitchen table, and he picks up from this guy. He's got a Marine photo from Vietnam. He's got a marriage photo. It shows they've probably been married 45 years. So he just gets that in his mind, and he approaches the guy and he says, "Hey, John," whatever his name was. He goes, "John, I'm so and so, and this so and so. We're the Secret Service. Do you know what the Secret Service does?" And the guy goes, "No." He goes, "Well, we do two things. We protect the president, and people run for president. We stop people from making counterfeit money." He goes, "When's the last time you made any counterfeit money?" And he goes, "I never have." He goes, "Well, now you know why I'm here." And without missing a beat, I just thought that was such a confident moment. He goes, "Look, I'm talking to you right now because I didn't decide I want to go mess with somebody. There's a reason I'm at this door, and you know what that reason is. But before I ask you, I want to say I'm giving you an opportunity because as I walked in, I met your wonderful wife, and I see you've been married for a long time by the accounts of those photos. I've seen you serve this country." And a lot of people didn't do that. So what I think I have here is somebody that made a poor choice, got involved in a politically heated discussion, and might have said something they wish they didn't say. If that's what we're talking about, let's talk about it and let's move forward. Is that what we're talking about? And the guy goes, "Yes." And it was a masterclass in how you prime an interaction, how you don't let the moment get too big of you, how you observe your surroundings. And I was like, from that moment on, man, I want to do this. And
Wow.
so from there, got involved, and I really wanted to get involved because with our Secret Service polygraph program, the way we do it is we would always give back to the locals for everything they do for us for our criminal cases. So we would offer up our services, especially in crimes against children cases. So
Mhm.
children can't choose the environments that they're born into. So if you can be their sheepdog, to me, that was what I liked more than anything else in my career.
Well, that's amazing, and thank you for sharing that story. I mean, imagine having that was your Obi-Wan, right? Leading you and showing you like you said, a master
100%.
class, and you got to see
Yeah.
it right there in front of you unfold in action. Wow, that's amazing. Just hearing you retell it, I was like, wow. My next question, actually, I kind of figured, we're gonna have him mention, but the next question is, throughout your career since that day one to till now, there've had to been people like colleagues, co-workers, managers, directors, or just other people in the business that you looked up to in the industry and in the Secret Service that you admired that had a positive impact along your journey of your career. And so the goal of this question is kind of like that Oscar acceptance speech. I know there's
Mhm.
never enough time in the world to name everybody, and you don't have to give last names if you don't want to protect protect their identities. But I guess the goal of the question is pay homage to those people that have had a positive impact on your career.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Brian, Dez, and Lee were my partners in Chicago when I first started out, and they were people that just I was blown away by. Being able to see greatness and learn from greatness, you need to have those professional mentors around. But yeah, Brian Leary, amazing polygraph examiner. Yeah, I learned so much from him and got to be in the room with him so many times and my other partners as well. But it wasn't really until I got to the polygraph school because I was arrogant. I thought I knew it all, and
Hmm.
I went to the federal school where I got to see the entire intelligence community and federal law enforcement community, their liaisons there, and they all had different pieces of the pie, and it was like going to a buffet. I had just been eating this one dish my entire life, and now I was putting all this other stuff on my plate, and it was like, wow. And I truly believe that by teaching and by even seeing students that didn't have any knowledge, sometimes people have attributes and skill sets. You see these musicians out of nowhere, Elvis, other people like that they've never been trained, but
Yeah.
all of a sudden they've got this skill set that you're like, whoa, okay. And going to the school, and not only did I learn from people that had that skill set and had that training, but I learned from students that I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that way. And I was able to steal from them because that if you think you got it all figured out, that's the problem.
Hmm.
And so I learned really, really quickly that you got to have that buffet mentality. And
I like
I
that,
was
the
blessed to be
buffet
in an environment that had a
mentality.
big buffet.
So I had some questions here that I wanted to ask that I've written down, and I think we already answered one of them about the whole idea of guiding people towards truth without coercion. You clearly
Mm-hmm.
demonstrated that more than once. Another question I had here was the behavioral indicator questions. Are there kind of
Oh
common
yeah.
questions that allow you to, I guess, kind of, like you said, get those check engine lights to pop up, I guess, better than others.
Yeah, in serious cases, these can be very effective, and they've been around a long time. And you're going to have your haters be like, "Oh, these are problematic and they're not perfect." And you're like, "Yeah, I know they're not perfect. I wish there was a perfect, easy button that said when somebody talks to me, like, and maybe we will invent that at some point. That
Hmm.
would be, we'll see. But there are certain questions that can help me out. Say, for instance, let's keep this at a very base level and just talk about our kids. So I've got two kids. And let's say a vase is broken downstairs and it's an expensive vase. And I've told both kids, don't have your friends over here and don't be roughhousing around that vase. But the vase breaks. And I come
Hmm.
home from work and I see it broken. Both kids were there. I'm going to separate them and I'm going to ask them, I'm going to say, Jenny, what do you think should happen to someone that breaks an expensive vase? I think they should get in trouble and I think they should have to pay for it because they should know better. Okay, Bob. Hey, Bob, what do you think should happen to somebody who breaks an expensive vase and knew better? Well, maybe if they said they're sorry and they admitted to it, maybe it'll be okay. Yeah, that's obviously at a very low level, but
Yeah,
I'm thinking it's my son,
yeah.
right? But if I want to go into new circumstances, everybody wants it with that question. If you say, "What do you think should happen from a judgment standpoint?" If I'm working a homicide or many times cases against children, anytime I hear the word treatment or second chance is very problematic because I was working a case in which sadly a 10-year-old girl caught a stray bullet and died. And I asked the suspect, I said, what do you think should happen to somebody that shoots and kills someone else?
Hmm.
And he says, everybody deserves a second chance. You know what? A 10-year-old girl's dead. Anybody would say, I don't know, whatever the law says, they should go to jail, whatever. But people, it's a hack because people a lot of times say what they would want to have happen to them. That's what the guilty person tends to say.
Hmm.
It is not perfect. A lot of people that have been around the system, they know this. You know, Charlie Manson read How to Win Friends and Influence People in Prison. So
And he
there's
surely did.
information out there. So it's one of those things where if I get a good answer, that's fine. But what I'm listening for is nails on the chalkboard. And so that would be the first one. The second one would be a question like, is there any reason why? And I can finish that in a couple different ways. So let's say, Jim, you were accused of stealing something on the south side of whatever city you were in, of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
But you say you were in the north side of Pittsburgh. All right. Now
Okay.
it's a lot easier now with phones and more types of electronics that we have now. But then I ask you, I said, okay, you say you're on the north side of Pittsburgh. This happened on the south side of Pittsburgh. Hey, Jim, is there any reason why, when we look at the GPS on your phone or we look at license plate readers on the south side of Pittsburgh, is there any reason why we may see your car on the south side of Pittsburgh around 8 o'clock?
Mm. And then I'd be like,
Now,
well, I might have stopped off to drop off a friend, but I was only there
oh,
for.
you know what? A lot of times what you get is, oh, you know what? You're right. I did go down it. And now we've got some investigative leads that we can pick apart. You're looking for that delay, you're looking for that change of the story that now I might be able to strategically use evidence to determine that that's not the case. I can disprove their alibi.
Mhm.
And one of the things on a case, it was sadly, it was a homicide case that my partner Brian and I worked. But there was a deceased individual about 3 o'clock in the morning, and a phone call went to the suspect. And of course, the police asked him, "Hey, did you go there? Did you go to the house?" He goes, "No." During the polygraph, I said, "Hey, there's a bank in between your house and her house." I said, "Is there?" They said they've got cameras on the ATMs and all around the bank. Is there any reason why that you might have left to go, to the supermarket or anything? And at first he had said, because he had said, no, I didn't go out. I slept. I was sleeping. We asked him that question. It's like, oh, you know what?
Mm.
Yeah, I was jonesing for some nicotine and I went and got some cigarettes. Well, what's the problem with that story? There's obviously video cameras in the story. So his story falls apart and he ends up admitting to it. But so that's another question. Is there any reason why? We can use this in all different aspects. If
Yeah.
somebody says they were somewhere, oh, did you see the automobile accident that was up there? Now they're in a tough spot because if they said they're at the mall and there was a huge automobile accident that you alluded to, there wasn't an automobile accident there. So if they say, yeah, I saw it, that they're making up the story. So there's a
Ah,
lot of different ways that you can
that's
do
a
this.
good
And
tactic.
there's an indicator question, and I call it a dartboard question because if I'm going to talk to people, I want to know where the dartboard is. I don't want to have to carpet bomb. I want a surgical strike. So car dealers do this. They'll say, "What brings you in here today?" "Oh, I'm looking for a car, whatever, whatever." Then they'll ask, What three things are you looking for in a car?" I'm looking for safety. I'm looking for dependability. I'm looking for gas mileage. Well, those are the only three words you're going to hear for the rest of the day.
Mhm.
Whatever they show you is the most dependable. It's got the best gas mileage and it's the safest, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know what you're looking for. So what I will do is give me three reasons why you think somebody might have done X, Y, and Z, whatever the crime is. And in one of these homicides, I said, can you come up with three reasons why somebody might shoot somebody? He goes, I don't know, disrespect. Maybe they were afraid of the other people. I don't know. Maybe they had just gotten a new gun. And when they got that new gun, they wanted to show it off to their buddies. And when they were showing it off to their buddies, somebody mistook that as a threat and things popped off from there. Wow,
That's a
that was
lot of
very
detail.
specific. And obviously that is ultimately what he ended up coming in on is that people, due to recency bias, they will tend to tell you why they did it. So as a result, my themes to them can be very, very targeted and I can pick the lock a little bit easier.
Wow. Wow, this is really eye-opening and insightful for me to hear this from you. And it's like, and then when you hear it, your conscience would be like, well, that seems pretty straightforward and simple. But again, I think like you said before, about human behavior, and humans are very complex creatures, right? And it's almost like you're trying to every person's a unique onion. You got to somehow figure out the way to peel those layers off to get to who they are. So I want to take a moment in the podcast where I call it my moment of levity, where we kind of take a pause on the
Yeah,
technical discussions
sure.
here. I'm gonna shoot you some rapid fire questions. Whatever the first thing that pops in your head, just blurt it out. There's no right or wrong answer. So I'm gonna start with an easy one. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No,
Okay, he didn't hesitate too long on that, so it's not a sandwich. This one splits a room of IT professionals. So are you more of a Star Wars or Star Trek fan?
Star Wars without question.
Which trilogy set of Star Wars are you the biggest fan of?
Original,
The original,
original.
4, 5, 6, New Hope. Who's your
Yeah.
favorite character of that trilogy?
Chewbacca,
Chewbacca, Chewie. All right. Uh, Cake or pie?
cake,
What kind of cake?
red carpet.
Red, red what?
Red carpet. So like that tri-layer with the cream cheese. So the
Oh,
red cake with the I think
okay.
my mom calls it red carpet cake.
Red carpet cake. All right. First time I heard it, I was like, did you mean to say red velvet? But red carpet cake. All right.
Or you know what? Let me change. Gooey butter cake. It's
Gooey
not
butter
really a
cake.
cake. It's kind of a pie. It's a St. Louis thing. It's the unhealthiest thing that you will ever see in your life.
And that's what
Gooey
desserts are
butter
supposed to
cake.
be unhealthy, right? And my final question is, what is the your most favorite book of all time that you read, and what was the last book that you read?
In college, I read a book called All God's Children. It was a criminological book that followed like five generations of individuals from South Carolina all the way up to Chicago. Just a fascinating book to look at one, the history of the United States and also inner city life. So, yeah, that was an interesting book, All God's Children. And then recently just reread, oh, shoot, I can reach it right here. Wonderful book by Robin Dreeke. It's Not All About Me. If you
Okay.
haven't read it, read it. Robin Dreeke is a former FBI profiler, worked their counterintelligence unit. He basically recruited spies. So
Excellent.
if he can recruit spies with stuff in this book, you can definitely get value out of it. I read it about 15 years ago, and he
Uh,
just came out
and is
with
that your book
another
right there on the
updated copy.
shelf?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
So can we get a close up of that?
absolutely.
Look at that. What a beautiful cover. I love the little
Oh,
redactions
thank
on
you.
there. That definitely makes it pop and stand out.
Well,
So
it's kind of timely.
let's get back to talking about this book. So one of the things that again, I mentioned TV crime shows and movies and film. We see that whole sense of urgency where they're on. Let's say it's an attorney show and they're coming up to the witness or the accused, and they're just rapid fire throwing out all this information and accusatory tones, and eventually the person breaks, right? But that's not really how it happens because people just get more defensive and more adamant into their positions, right? Because they're being backed into a corner. But the question I have is like when it comes to, trying to, I guess, balancing that sense of urgency, because let's say you are working a case where, in like cybersecurity, let's say we're trying to work an incident and try to figure out what's the truth of what happened. And a lot of times people don't want to take accountability, responsibility for that oh, oops moment, or they want to
Mhm.
kind of hope that no one finds out the real truth because no one wants to be the one that caused an outage or something significant to happen. So how would someone you advise to balance that urgency with the need to avoid things like you mentioned confirmation bias, false assumptions, or to push someone into a wrong narrative? What would you recommend for someone to avoid that?
Well, calm leads to calm. And when people see that you need something, the power dynamic changes. If I go into a car sales and somebody's like, oh, we got to act now, I know I'm not getting a good deal, right? I know they're trying to pull the wool over my eyes. Calm
High
leads to
pressure
calm. And
sales, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, look at it this way in protection with the Secret Service, we were always taught don't run if you don't absolutely have to. Don't look stressed unless you absolutely are stressed because when people see that, it's that collective fear that kind of gets in to everybody is that contamination. There's an emotional contamination when you put that out. Many times when we look at mirroring and body language, we don't understand that many times we're just seeing a mirror back of ourselves. And if that is we're anxious, they're going to be anxious. And now all of a sudden we start thinking, oh, they're anxious. No, it's just us. It's what we're contaminating them with. So I want to be at the utmost level. I want to be calm. And yes, there are times where we need something, all right, so quickly. And I'll just give you a quick story. This happened on the same day with my partner Brian. In the first case, we had that arrogance. I guess we had a baby that was dead, and we had two
Mhm.
parents. And we decided, you know what? We don't think mom did it. We think dad did it. We're going to talk to dad first. We rushed it. And dad was so close to giving us information, but he didn't. He lawyered up. We go to talk to mom. She is emotionally unable to be talked to, but she said one thing to us that gave us who it was, kind of, and the weapon that we believed was used. And that was a little miniature baseball bat. And if we would have had that information before when we talked to the subject, we would have been able to, that would have been that little piece of evidence that would have pushed it over the edge. But our arrogance and our lack of taking time cost us that case.
Mm.
Now it's kind of like never leave your wingman. It's like one of those things as far as take your time, calm is calm. And later that night, we were so devastated because, this is a case that stayed cold. But later that night, there was a double homicide and we got called on and there were two subjects and we decided to do the right thing. We decided to not talk to the main suspect first. So we talked to the secondary suspect and we took our time, even though the police were like, we've got to get this done. We're running out of time. And by doing so, we understood the backstory as to why this individual did this. We understood that the other people were going to come hurt his family. We understood that he didn't wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning with ill will in his heart, that these people had started all of this. And by having those little tidbits of information when we transitioned to the secondary exam, even though we were really tight on time, we knew the information that we needed to provide, and as a result we were able to get that confession on the double homicide because we took our time. So very rarely do you make good decisions, on either side of the house, either buying or selling. I mean, when have you made a good decision when you quickly went and bought a car?
Yeah, yeah.
When have you made a good decision when you quickly sold something?
Hmm. Oh
Very
yeah.
rarely.
The
um
conversation I had in the past year regarding the difference between accuracy and speed is you could be going in the wrong direction really fast. So accuracy
yes,
trumps speed, particularly in like things like boxing and things that where,
absolutely.
accuracy is always going to trump speed. Speed can get lucky. But more often than not, accuracy. I love that how you gathered more context. Like you said, more information you have, the more information you guys are able to work with. You
the
know, Wow.
Yep. The best predictor of future behavior, Jim, is past behavior. And if you think about that, get consistent results over time and you're less likely to make mistakes. When we make a quick decision, that's when we get scammed, right? I need this now. Scarcity and time is the basis of so many financial and computer-based criminology, right? I mean, it's there's so much behind that. Is that crime is all based upon need plus ability plus opportunity plus justification times stress, and it's mitigated by morality and consequences of getting caught. It's a mathematical equation
I
that I
love
need
that.
to
Is that
reverse
is that
engineering.
published somewhere? Is that in your book by any chance?
No,
Did
that's
you just
fine.
Okay. I like that. I
That's a
like that.
meism. Well,
That you
and so if you think of it, think of Walter White. okay, from Breaking Bad.
Okay, yeah, Breaking Bad, great series.
So let's use that formula. What was his need? He needed
Money,
money.
because he thought he
Okay,
was
for what?
dying, had only so much time left.
Yeah. His abilities were what? What was his background?
Oh yeah, he was chemistry.
Okay. What was his opportunity? He had Jesse as
Yeah,
far as
Jesse,
the
and he knew he
distribution
could
network
make a
and
better
Tuco.
quality meth. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you had his justification was, well, if I'm not going to do it, other people are going to do it. And I can make better quality stuff that's not
Yeah.
going to eat people's teeth away. Right.
Hmm.
What was his stressors? His chemotherapy, his
Hmm.
child having a disability, his wife going through multiple issues, Jesse being
New
crazy,
baby
right? A
on the
lot of
way.
stressors, new baby on the way. And then that's what's pushing him towards the criminality. What's on the underside of that iceberg? But morality. Well, morality can kind of ebb and flow based upon the circumstances, right?
Hmm.
And criminals, especially high level criminals, if they're insulated, they don't feel like they're going to get caught. And his consequences were what? I'm dying anyway.
Yep.
That was the perfect opportunity for a criminal act. So, what I like to do is when I quote unquote elicit information from people, I reverse engineer that formula, and you'd be surprised at how effective it can be.
Wow, what a great insight there. So my last question in relation to the book, a lot of executives, particularly CISOs that could be dealing with any kind of insider threats, phishing failures, or executive non-compliance, what is the one question that they should stop asking? And what's a question that would be better to ask instead when they're trying to elicit more truthful answers or try to get to the source of something when, in the corporate world, everybody's trying to be proper and nice and pretenses, but sometimes you just want to get to the what I call it in the military, the bluff, right? The bottom line up front. But what is a
Yeah.
question that a lot of folks, that managers, executives that are usually asking when they're trying to get to a truth that you should stop asking this, but this is something better.
Stop asking why. Why is accusatory? Why is
Ooh.
problematic? Why is judgmental? I want to be curious. What is it about? What caused? What was in there, the thought process during that decision making time? You'd be surprised that just by changing what instead of why, you'd be surprised at how many people don't feel you're hitting me up, you're interrogating me here. Also, we do it at the right time. We don't do it right when they get in, we don't do it right before they leave, because that's static from the outside world factoring in. I like 10 and 2 for my times to talk to people.
Ooh.
Lastly, I
Okay.
want to create that Catholic confessional. What I mean by that is I want to create that location that's private, that's non-judgmental. I want it to be to where I'm not behind my desk with my tall back chair like I'm the emperor, and
Hmm.
I'm talking across a table to somebody that's my quote unquote underling. I want to be at a table that's low. I want to be with chairs which are the same height, and I want to be almost set up like I'm in a campfire. I don't want to be across from you. I want to be almost to the side of you. And that way we're working on a problem together. And I want to take this phone and I want to immediately shut it off and I want to put it away from me, because access is important. Attention is the best thing that we can give people. If I give you my unfettered attention in today's digital world that's so crazy, that is the most valuable thing that you can imagine. So I give you my undivided attention. And I might prime that with a little social proof and the standpoint of, look, we all make mistakes. There's no perfect people here. I just want perfectly honest people. I've talked to a lot of people in the situation that you're in. I just want you to be straight with me. And you'd be surprised by just that preamble versus why, leading off with that, you're much more likely to be able to get people to give you the brass tacks.
Wow. And it's almost like an inverse, like parallel to like what social engineering is for hackers, right? When they're trying to elicit information like passwords and so forth, they're usually using tactics like urgency or authority, presumed authority, and there's several other tactics that they use. But in your case, you're not, again, not leveraging coercion or fear of, management disapproval or fear of losing their job. You're just having a conversation, making them, building that rapport and instant trust. Like you said, putting the deposits into that bank, the good
Yeah.
deposits. Wow, that's just interesting. But it's somewhat like an inverse. Like if you was thinking in terms of like Superman versus Bizarro Superman, the Bizarro here would be the social engineering that happens, right? And then the
Yeah.
good side of it is what you're doing with this
Every
approach.
everything that we do and all the people I teach is I talk about I want to make a documentary and not a horror movie. A horror movie is manipulation, it's social engineering tactics, it's influence manipulation principles that a jury and a judge would look at and be like, man, you're taking advantage. That's wrong. You're quote unquote cheating. You're hacking the system. I want to play fair and
Hmm.
I just want to create that off ramp and I want to earn their answers. It's not about the
Okay.
questions I ask. I
Earn
want
their
to earn their
answers.
answers. And if I can earn those answers, then a jury is going to look at that and be like, wow, he played fair. He offered him water. He offered him a drink. He gave him a bathroom break. He was respectful. He talked about family, education, employment. He spent a lot of time talking about leisure activities. And the guy opened up and said he did it. Who's going to find fault in that? And also, that keeps us from getting a false confession. The
Hmm.
worst thing I could do is get somebody to say that they did something they didn't do. So I don't go into an interaction looking for a confession. I go into the interaction looking for the truth. And sometimes that truth is not what I expected. Sometimes they didn't have anything to do with it. So I always finish all my interactions with, is there any question that I didn't ask you that you think I need to know? You'd be surprised at how many times people are smart. They may solve a case on their own, but and I didn't think about it. And then I'll say, did I treat you fairly? Did I treat you professionally? And why did you choose to talk to me? Sometimes the answer on a murder, rape, robbery is just, Brad, you treated me like a human being.
Ooh.
And I'm like, well, damn, like, okay, it wasn't that one thing I said. It was just, I was respectful. The World Cup's going on. What happens after the game? We fought all game. We got red cards, yellow cards. What do? They exchange jerseys and hug,
Yeah.
right? Because we treat people with respect. You got
Yeah.
to leave people better off for having interacted with you, not the other way around.
Wow, what a great perspective there. Man, that just blew my mind for a second because I already had my next question for you. But when you mentioned documentaries, and I'm glad you mentioned it because it just brought this question to mind. When you watch, do you happen to watch any kind of criminal
Yeah.
documentaries where when you're watching what they're doing and it just either makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up or you just get furious with that's not the right way to do it? How often does that happen? Is there any recent examples of a documentary where there's one that I'm trying to remember the name of the documentary, but it was about the gentleman that won the lottery, and then he
Yeah.
had his
Yeah.
parents, I guess, owned that junkyard. And so, long story short, a woman that was supposed to take a photo of one of his vehicles for sale ended up dead. And it's a sensational case. I think they've had two seasons, maybe a third season, but it's interesting to where, depending on how they edit the documentary, obviously perspective is
Yeah.
everything. It makes you really believe the guy's innocent because they show how they kept him in that room for so long. It seemed like they were pressuring and trying to coerce a confession. And of course, him and I think the other young boy did do a written confession, which ultimately sealed their fates because they I guess confessed. And of course, the rest of the series is talking about how they're trying to go through the appeals process. But when you watch things of that, how often? Because there's a lot of folks like Neil deGrasse Tyson like does things with film and other things that are scientifically not right. But in the world of interrogations and so forth, what are some of the big ones that whether it's a film or a documentary or something that you see that's like that really just kind of what's the word I'm looking for that really infuriates you?
Well, the Amanda Knox case is one of the most
Mm,
notable ones. Is that that's just a travesty, and that sometimes you see these and you think, if I was in those set of circumstances, would I have done something different? I hope. Now, her roommate's killed, and that's once again perspective versus perception. Is that Amanda Knox is a foreigner in a foreign land, and she knows two people. She knows her roommate and she knows her boyfriend.
hmm.
The Italian police, from their perspective, they're working a homicide case, which they don't have a lot of homicides, which is great. But unfortunately, with that, they don't have a lot of experience
Yep.
working homicides. So what do? They come on scene and they see her, and they see her cavorting and consoling with her boyfriend, kissing, hugging, that type of stuff. And from their perspective, they think this is odd behavior. This is almost celebratory type behavior. Why would you do that when your roommate was dead? So instantly she grows metaphorical horns in their eyes. And the confirmation bias kicks in and they have no red teaming to look. That's so important to have people that look at alternate possibilities. And that's what they didn't have. And so it was always she did it. And ultimately, by going at her every single day and interrogating her every day, they got a minor admission that they took as a confession. And for years, she had to try to clear her name when she had nothing to do with that. Even to this day, after they've got DNA on the person that actually did it, they're like, nah, she was involved, because we want that bias of, people always want to be right. We never want to be wrong. So that's the case that really hits home to me. I mean, the making of a murderer that you talked about,
Oh yeah.
how I wasn't involved in that case. I didn't see the backstory, but you're right. How you edit it, the sound that you put in the background, the ominous sound you put in
Yeah.
the background, all that can play into people's beliefs. I can't remember the name of the one in the California case that was on Netflix a couple years ago, where when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, that guy did it. and then it turns out to be somebody completely else. But I love how when you watch Behavioral Panel or some of these shows where they look at things after the fact, after they know the case facts, and then
Yeah.
they break down, oh, he touched his nose, he did that, I wouldn't have done this, I would have done that. And I'm like, okay, it's easy to say Monday morning quarterback after the
Yeah.
fact.
Hindsight
When you're
2020.
behind, when you're behind center and that middle linebacker's rushing, it's a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit leery on documentaries because honestly, I don't know how I would have reacted in some of those circumstances because we're not perfect.
Got it. Is there any potential, and now that we're talking documentaries, have you been ever engaged by like a Netflix or some studio or director to potentially take maybe some of your cases and turn them into documentaries?
Yeah, some of the stuff I'm still in law enforcement in a certain level, so I try to avoid that as much as possible. There was a counterfeit case. Arthur Williams Jr. did about 8 million in counterfeit, and I've talked to him since, and he's doing some stuff now that we'll see where it goes. But fascinating story of a guy that did $8 million of counterfeit, was in Rolling Stone. I think I have his. Well, I'll get it real quick.
All right.
Fascinating case, but he had this picture in Rolling Stone with his face on it. So you can imagine what that does to your ego.
Yeah.
But I arrested him. It was my first case that I had, and I was a snot nosed kid, and I let him teach me about how he did his counterfeit so he confessed. And then he got out, and he obviously had this article done. So he got, he thought he was the best in the world. But great individual by the name of Eric was the case agent, but we knew he was getting back into it. And I told him I flew in on the Gulf Stream. I told him this was the biggest case, and I told him I'd be honored if you signed my Rolling Stone magazine, and he did. He signed to Brad, the greatest Secret Service agent. You got me. Almost a catch me if you can.
Yeah, that's what I was about
But
to say. It just makes me think of Catch Me If You Can. Yeah.
well, it's one of those things where these so many of these cases, you hear these law enforcement officials talk about how you look at me, look at me. Sometimes it's just the case that falls on your desk, and you just happen to be, and that's what this was. It just happened to
Right.
fall on my desk, but it was fascinating. Afterwards, after 8 years in prison, he went from fake art in the form of counterfeit to now he's an actual artist and has a studio in Chicago. And his son got involved in the counterfeit trade. They were both locked up together in federal penitentiary, and now he makes huge money with his actual art. So
Doing
it's one
legitimate
of those
work.
things that
Hey, second
truth is,
chances, right?
yeah, truth is stranger than fiction.
It's
Everybody loves a
stranger
second
fiction.
chance.
Everyone loves a second chance. So before we wrap up, someone that's watching this right now that's just like me, fascinated about it. Maybe it's a young person just out of high school, or someone that's like probably on the verge of maybe dropping out or trying to think of what they want to do differently in their college degree. What would be some quick advice or guidance? Is there like a resource or website they could go check out to learn more about getting into this field of doing polygraphs and behavioral, examinations of people and so forth?
Yeah, you know what? I always tell people if they want to get involved in federal law enforcement, try to stay away from the criminal justice degree, that type of things. No disrespect from people got it. I
Yeah.
went that route, but it almost pigeonholes you in that you see it in the skill sets that a lot of your listeners probably have is they have certifications. They
Hmm.
have things in which, right, I got these certifications. They could go work for anybody. So we get a lot of people in the Secret Service that were from the military. We get a lot of people that were from law enforcement, so they can go that route. But we've almost doubled the size of the organization in recent years because of the huge increases in our protective mission. You got the Olympics coming up in 2028. So I would always say for people trying to get in the Secret Service, get a skill set that you can fall back on if it doesn't work out. Whatever that might be, that AI is not going to take away from, that still
Hmm.
needs humans to do that task. I mean, I feel for coders and paralegals and people like that just started about 3 years ago because you're like, man, good luck,
AI.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, AI is just going to take those businesses. So, and keep your background clean. I was a
Yeah.
square in my background, and you're going to have to take a polygraph. So,
Hmm.
and be honest on that application form because that's what we're going to polygraph you on. So, we don't want perfect people. I said this before. We want perfectly honest people. So, put your warts out there on your application form where you made mistakes. We're a much more whole person concept now. So, we do allow you to make mistakes, but just put it out there. And if anybody wants to connect with me direct, they can always go to bradleybeeler.com. They can hit the contact button. And I talked to a lot of people that were me 30 years ago that were
Hmm.
just looking for, hey, what do you think I should do? I'll take a call from them, man. I'm not charging them anything. I'm sure that's life. You give back to the people that gave back to me during my internship. So, yeah, anybody that wants to reach out, feel free and connect on the socials at Brad Beeler 1865 on Instagram. Just DM me, and man, I'll give you whatever information I can.
So to save you folks the Google searching, Brad will give me all his links, his socials, his websites, and the links to the books that he mentioned and more. They'll all be in the description below. So just pause the video, saving you that Google search. Brad, my next couple of questions, I promise I'm gonna wrap up. I know you're a busy man, but a lot of us professionals do make time for things that are doing good in the world. And so, are there any kind of charities, nonprofits, volunteer groups that are out there doing great work in the world that you want to shine a light on? Whether you just believe in their mission, whether you give your time, your money or energy to them that you want to kind of shine a light on, like, hey, this organization, charity, volunteer group is doing some great work in the world.
Yeah, I'll give you two real quick. So Hunts for Honor, a good friend of mine, Sean Calhoun, service member, got involved in the polygraph community, but he does this for, wounded veterans. He takes them on hunts
Oh,
and truly,
great.
truly an amazing thing. So whether it be, he's a bourbon guy, so he does a lot of bourbon sales. We got a golf tournament coming up that we hope to support him. So huntsforhonor.com. Big fan of that. Sean Calhoun running that. It's one of those organizations that gives 100% of everything they get back
Oh,
to the
excellent.
wounded veterans. So that's something. And then just generalize anything that supports kids. So the child advocacy centers, your local child advocacy center is going to be underfunded. It's not going to have the resources. They don't have access to training. So anything we can do to help them, because once again, kids are our future. That's not just a punchline. It truly is the case. And they can't choose the environments that they were born into. So I've handled protectees that are millionaires, billionaires, and they can afford protection. Kids have no one else looking out for them. So anything we can do to give back to the kiddos.
And my final question is for the rest of your 2026, are there going to be any stages that you're going to be at, conferences you're attending, book signing events? Is there another book already in the works? So, what are some of your milestones and goals for the rest of your 2026?
Yeah, working on the next book. Don't have a title yet, but just about difficult conversations and kind of. So I'm really tight in the aperture up on that, getting away from the kind of law enforcement crowd. A lot of polygraph conferences that we'll be talking about. So I guess if you're not a polygraph examiner, not necessarily, but and then a lot of stuff with the local law enforcement. I love to give back to them, do free trainings for them because you just never know when the biggest case that you're going to see on Nancy Grace is going to come from your community. And once again, you don't want it to be a horror story. You want it to be a documentary if you did everything right. That's where I'm at right now. And then we're transitioning into the keynotes on the business side. So, really looking forward to taking some of these lessons and hopefully helping corporate America out.
Love that. And the fact that there's polygraph conferences, that just blows my mind. I mean, there's something you just don't really think about, but they actually have polygraph conferences. And the
Oh
first
yeah.
thing that came to mind when you talk about supporting local law enforcement agencies and offices and so forth, made me think of Mindhunter, where they were going around to different, police stations trying to provide some guidance
Yep.
and training.
That's it.
And I love that.
That's
So,
that's
so
why
go
that's
ahead.
why I got all those that's why I've got all those challenge coins behind me,
That's
Jim.
an impressive collection there on the wall behind you
Thank
there.
you.
Brad, I know we could talk forever, and I know we've run over time, but thank you so much for giving me of this time and your insights and perspectives into this. You know, a lot of folks out there thinking, well, normally there's more cyber talking going in there, but the human side of everything, people touch computers to do the work that they do,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the weakest link in all of this is usually people, right? Whether they're a malicious actor or people just make honest mistakes, right?
Yep.
So getting down to the truth and getting quickly to that is, what a lot of us have to do in cybersecurity. And sometimes it's not all that easy because we're just regular humans doing what we think is best, asking those why questions. And here's Brad giving us some clear, great guidance and insights on how to change up the approach. And it could mean everything by changing up your approach and your tone and the manner by which you go with it. So thank you for all those insights. Brad, thank you again. And all my guests, get the final word. This was not on the agenda question, so you could talk about your favorite food cuisine, your favorite color of the rainbow. It does not have to be anything related to your work or career, but whatever you want to talk about, the final word is yours.
All right. Look out for yourself. Keep your mental health in focus. And that a lot of people in this space, we have to look at, unfortunately, we have to look at a lot of bad images. All right. We had to talk to a lot of bad people, and those things cause vicarious scars. So let your ego down, talk to those mental health professionals, because unfortunately, we've lost too many people in the military and law enforcement sector, either to suicide or also to alcohol and drugs. So I don't want to end things on a negative note. I just want to say, let that ego down and accept help where it is, because a lot of people in the child exploitation space, unfortunately, have to go to some dark places. So please look out for number one, yourself, because you can't be a great father. You can't be a great mother. You can't be a great wife or husband if you're not taking care of yourself.
Well said. Well, thank you, Brad, for being on the Top Cyber Pro podcast.
Thank you, sir.